Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. How are you this morning? Where are you joining and tuning in from? Tuning in from? That's what we'll go with. Say good day like a real Aussie that you are, because I know you follow along and you love all things Australian too. Well, okay. We're enjoying doing class together. And this is I just rocked in from gym, did trauma-informed movement. My body's killing me look. And today I thought we'd have a look at something a little bit different so that we know what it's about. So it's about boundaries, but we're going to do it a little bit different. So we're on track because we want to impact 10,000 people with all the information that we have that is setting us free from complex PTSD. And today when I want to talk about boundaries, I want us to be able to be real and raw and honest with ourselves about why we don't set boundaries. Okay, now we've not talked about this before, but I think it's really, really important from the perspective that we can have all the information about boundaries and they can sit beside us and we know that we've got to do it for our own health, for our mental health, but we're not going to implement them if we can't feel why we're not doing it. So why wouldn't we implement boundaries? So it could be we have a fear of what other people think. So one of my catchphrases for that was, what other people think of me is none of my business. And I spent a long time repeating that over and over and over. What other people think of me is none of my business. And of course, our inner critic wants us to, get on top and ahead of it all, like criticize ourselves first before everybody else does. So then we retrain the programming to what other people think of me is none of my business. And another thing that can stop us from setting boundaries is we assume people will be mad. And sometimes people are mad, but it's up to them to learn to manage their emotions, and as adults we can have those conversations. Sometimes I've got a lot of the ums happening this morning. Sometimes we think it's not that important. Now, if you're thinking it's not that important to have a boundary, then you want to ask yourself some really hard questions. Okay, if I don't think it's important to have boundaries, am I setting myself up to be constantly emotionally hurt by other people? Ask the question, reflect on it, look what's happening in your life. If I don't want to set a boundary because it's not that important, am I unwilling to change up what's happening in my life? And that's okay, provided that you want to keep living with the same results. That's a choice you make. What else? Why we don't want the hassle. And it takes work to put boundaries in place. And it takes massive amounts of courage because we weren't shown this as children. And our brain has to, and our whole mind, so it has to wrap itself around that this is going to mean change. And often change can trigger anxiety. So we've got to work through it, put strategies in place to not say, right, I'm just setting this boundary and that's it. It's like, what am I processing internally so that I can feel safe to put this boundary in place and make it stick, okay? We want to avoid conflict. Oh, yeah, we know we do, because I can tell you now, I hate conflict. I absolutely hate it. But I've also learned through trial and error that sometimes I have to be willing to stand up for myself and advocate for myself. And it doesn't mean we do it unkindly. We can do it with kindness, but it means that I need to be willing to do that for me, okay? Sometimes we prefer to just go with the flow. That's never been an issue for me because I want to stand up and we want to impact so many people and help them break free, that going with the flow was never my issue. If it is, understand that if you put a boundary in place, you're going to feel better and more confident within yourself. So it's going to boost your self-esteem. So that's a question you can reflect on. Do I want to stop going with the flow so that I can boost my self-esteem? We have a fear of being selfish, okay? And that was definitely something that I used to worry about all the time, is, am I being selfish doing this? And in the end, I had to, because if I didn't, then my health would keep going backwards. So it became a situation where I went, okay, I have to do this. And if it's seen as selfish, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't change how other people see it. I can have conversations if they're willing to, but I have to be willing to put these boundaries in place so that I become well. All right. Now remember, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors except us who are behind the closed doors. So then we go, it doesn't matter what the world thinks of me or anything outside of my home think of me. I need to be able to get up, because we've got complex PTSD. I need to be able to get up in my strength each day and go, I'm the one that's got to face the world, and I'm the one that's got to deal with my health. So I can't let what other people think of me be anything. So let me rephrase that. What other people think of me is none of my business. I have to frame that reference. And especially if we have the fawn response, which we spoke about in a masterclass last week, we are not so much codependent as people pleasers. So these are habits that we have to take on the challenge of going, I want to break free from this. I can break free from this. Okay? And sometimes we just don't know where to start with putting boundaries in place, and that's okay because there's lots of information to help us. So what are some of the boundaries that we can set ourselves or set within ourselves so that setting external boundaries with other people begins to become easier? One of the things that we can do is have a set routine each day. Now, with complex PTSD, a set routine actually helps our brain, our whole, not just our mind, okay, but our whole neurological system thrives on goals. Now, what I've noticed is doing this means that the night before, we've got our clothes ready for me to get up and go to gym, clothes ready to get in and do work. I've got the whole process set out. I've got the time I get up set on the alarm. Pardon me. And in my mind, because I've got all of that happening, our brain loves goals. So when we set these goals, it's like, wow, this is great stuff. Pardon me. And we get up, and it makes it easier for us to get up and make things happen. We want to start sticking to a budget. And when we've got complex PTSD, when our prefrontal cortex is offline, it can be hard to stick to a budget because money requires order. So we need to be well enough that we're going to be able to put things in an order and stick to it. What happens for us with finances is that when we're living on hypoarousal, which is something we discussed in the depression masterclass yesterday, and I'll talk more about it later this week, is that we don't actually, we need to build an awareness around when we're in our emotions and our imagination, because it's in that state that's unconscious. So we have to make it conscious, but until we do, it's an unconscious state. And then we end up spending money that we didn't realise we didn't have until the bill comes and we go, but I added it, and I've done this. And I'm going, but I added it all up. I added the budget up. I had it all listed. And it just gets blown apart. And I think, what the heck happened? And it wasn't until I started doing things like trauma-informed movement to get the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system working together again that I was like able to perceive. So one of the things that's offline is our perception. I was actually able to perceive where and what I couldn't see previously. So can you see how it's easy for us to get our budgets totally out of whack and be scratching our heads going, what the heck happened? And it used to drive me insane. Now, just on budgets, Now I'm able to have it in front of me, and I go, and because it's written down, I will go and say, right, this is what my budget is. This is how much I'm putting away to save for bills. And it all happens. And then if I start thinking, I realise I go into my imagination. I'm like, oh, yeah, I can do that and that and that and this and this. I go, I need to stop. I need to do some trauma-informed movement, and listen, go and do any sort of exercise to start getting back into the reality of hyperarousal. And then we're able to get this real life perception of the order of the finances. And look, now I'm saving more than I have in a long time because of this process of building an awareness of when the unconscious has triggered me into the hyperarousal. I tell you, it's hard work, but it's worth it, because otherwise we end up in this unnatural state of, why am I always stressed about money? Because I can't see what's happening. And it's not our fault, because the unconscious has been trying to keep us safe for something. Anyhow, that's another chat show. Let's look at other things that we can do to set boundaries within ourselves so that we can feel comfortable to set external boundaries. So we're building up our self-esteem, our self-confidence, our courage when we do these things for ourselves. I don't know if you want to do this, but limiting yourself to a set amount of TV or Netflix each day, I don't have an issue with that. If you do, then maybe you want to set a boundary for yourself. But ask the question, is it interrupting my day, or am I being productive enough and I'm allowed to have X amount of TV a day? It's up to you. We've got to ask the question though. What is the impact of the amount of hours I'm spending having on what I want to get done? And same thing for social media, for anything online. It gets us drawn in. Online shopping. And online shopping, that's one thing I've made a rule with myself. I never, ever, ever, ever purchase anything anymore when I'm tired, because I guarantee you that I think, oh yeah, I can afford that, blah, 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 and it just doesn't work, okay? So it's really something that you have to look at your habits and say, right, I want to put this boundary in place and say, I can leave this stuff here, and if in the morning I look at it and I go, yep, it all adds up, then we can do that. But give yourself time, space things out, okay? This one's for me, no working past 7 p.m. Ask my kids. I get so focused on what I'm doing that, yeah, well, all night working really has to stop. Only buying what's on your shopping list. And I know in America this is a thing, so no impulse buys at Target, okay? Now let's put our hands up for the impulse buys. But it's a boundary that we can be willing to set with ourselves. This one is important for complex PTSD, is having a regular bedtime and a regular wake-up time. And the reason why is we're teaching our whole internal nervous system, the unconscious, everything, that at this time we do this, and it actually creates a feeling of safety in those areas that we have a routine. It's really healthy. I didn't believe it until I actually started doing it, okay? And I've found that it is really, really healthy. Now, another reason why that's healthy is because I can more quickly become aware if the depression trigger's gone off, or if there's something I need to address because I'm out of routine. It's a really good way to keep that in check. Do you have a set day that you do your laundry? I try to, okay, but it's something that we can have as a boundary, internal boundary, and an internal strategy to keep us on track, to help us understand when hyperarousal happens and we've not got our order in place. Avoiding people who are hurtful, stress you out, basically drama. They're filled with drama. Are you willing to set an internal boundary that says, I don't want to go there anymore? And do you have strategies in place to help you do that? Dee says, regular sleeping times has helped incredibly. Yeah, I don't know about you, Dee, but I was really surprised how much that helped my whole system. Like, it was just amazing. Something so simple, but it did help. So the strategies to avoid people with drama, have you got them in place? Do you need to think about what you can do to have some internal boundaries in place? Okay. Not keeping junk food in the house. Well, that depends on how impulse driven you are. Okay. If you're at that stage where emotional eating is going to drive you into the sugar fest, then don't keep the junk food. But if you're at that stage of recovery where you can say, no, I don't feel like it, it can sit there till I actually want to choose to have it, then that's a boundary that you can choose for yourself. I go through different stages. Like sometimes it's, I can't have any in the house, and other times I've got to have it in the house so I don't actually go and buy it and eat it. So I won't eat it while it's in the house if it's there. But not having it in the house is like this massive red flag that I've got to have it, I've got to have it. It's just crazy. I don't understand why it works that way. But yeah, just having it there, it's like, oh, don't need it. How's that work for you? Do you have to have junk food in the house so that you don't eat it? Or do you have to have junk food in the house, out of the house, so that you don't eat it? You know, it's very different. Oh, listen, this next one on the list, limiting yourself to 2 cups of coffee per day, yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I don't have that many, but what is it? So if coffee's not your thing that you need to limit, what would be your thing that you need to limit each day? So ask that question. What's my one thing I need to put a boundary in place for myself because I need to limit it each day? Now here's an interesting one. It says not having sex until the whatever date, and I can only assume that's for single people who rush into relationships and it's the first thing on their agenda is sex, and without knowing it, they fall into the whole situation of, right, well, now we're connected. Especially us girls, sex is more about intimacy and connection. It's a whole different chat show for guys. You know, I've spoken to many men about this actually to see if what I had read over the years was true, that men can have sex, so we're talking outside of marriage, men will have sex and they don't do it to have that connection. So we have to be really careful and, you know, take care of our hearts and be sure of where someone's up to. So maybe that is a good thing that we set a date. I know Steve Harvey wrote a book about it. He's an American guy, and he says 3 months, you know, when you meet someone, 3 months, so that you really get to see what they're really like. So it's a question that you can ask yourself. You know, I'm not dating because I know that I want to be in a space where I know that my mental health is so far recovered that it's good and healthy, and that I really have got a handle on what's happening. And, you know, people may say, oh, yeah, you know, but you're fine. And I am, and I do things, but I'm also aware that the opposite is true, that if someone came into my life, I'm not ready for the added stress that someone new coming in. And people will say, oh, well, you know, it's not added stress if they're the right one and yada, yada, yada. Listen, they're a physical body, they have emotions, and they have their own mental process. The whole thing is new and it's a learning thing, and it will be stress on my whole internal system. So until I've built that internal system up into a stage of resilience, then I'm wise to say no, my health comes first. Okay, so these are things that we've got to ask ourselves personally. Where is my mental health at? Am I resilient enough for the changes that come with having someone new come into your life? And look, we've got to ask these questions and be real, because I look at people that I know whose marriages are going through challenging times, and I think, I'd collapse if that was happening to me. I couldn't cope with that sort of mental stress and pressure at this point in time. So go and talk to your married friends, and look, they're not bad marriages. It's just that marriage will always go through different times, different seasons of the pressure. So when you're setting these boundaries within yourself, know yourself really, really well, okay? Know what you can do and what you can't do, and then what you're working towards being able to do. Okay, I hope that all helps you with some inspirational information, and have the most wonderful, wonderful day and evening, and I will see you again tomorrow morning and with some great new information. Thanks for joining in, ladies. I really appreciate you. Bye for now.